money, sex and money, sex on a pile of money. We're just going to talk about infidelity, financial impropriety, love, sex, monogamy, monotony, how it all plays out together today. Long-form conversation, Better Call Sexton. But before we begin, remember to hit like, subscribe, hit that notification bell. Really does help the channel, which is growing every single day. Thanks to each and every one of you. And don't forget how much we appreciate it. Let's get after it.
All right, Jim, two of the biggest causes or underlying issues of divorce, money and infidelity.
Those are the big two.
Are those? Would you say that?
By far.
By far.
Any divorce lawyer would tell you those are the big two.
Well, because I was thinking, there's like the internet has become an X factor now, and I'm sure there's other things.
But when does it become a problem? When it manifests in financial scams that people get involved in, or overly ambitious things that people try to do without their spouse's permission, or more commonly, it leads to infidelity, dissatisfaction, emotional infidelity, physical infidelity, all that stuff.
So the big two is finances and infidelity.
100%.
So let's start with the money aspect.
Sure. Business before pleasure.
It is the root more when people are succeeding financially or struggling financially? Let's start there. Does it have it's like 50-50?
Yeah, I would say it's both. It's really whatever. I mean, I've been practicing divorce law since like 2001. So I got to see a bunch of iterations of what's happened in the markets. So I started around the time of the financial crisis, the predatory lending and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. Then I got to see sort of the dot-com bubble burst and then it rise back up again. So I've seen a lot of iterations of different economic climates. I got to see the COVID years happen. So I think a lot of what you learn is that during sort of average times, not a lot happens. But when there are financial stress and strain between people, there are two seemingly contradictory effects happening. Sometimes nothing unites like a common enemy. So if people are like, oh my God, we're going to lose the house. If they were kind of fighting before, it brings them closer together because they have something to worry. It's just like if a couple is having some issues and then one of their kids gets quite sick. They kind of get their shit together because they're like, all right, wait a minute. Something we care a lot about or some common thing we have to fight against is more important than the things that divide us. So that happens. Or the strain of that thing creates discord between two people, and it takes a system that was already had some cracks in it and it breaks it apart. It's the final sort of straw that breaks the camel's back. So that happens quite a bit when it comes to financial struggle, financial strain. A giant negative contingency that occurs is loss of employment. That's why when unemployment is up, you tend to see the divorce rate correlate with it. And I think this, by the way, is a harbinger of some very dangerous times ahead because AI is really coming to supplant a tremendous number of jobs. That's why we saw some of the volatility in recent weeks in the stock market was, there was some toe dipping by some of the models like Anthropic into the legal sphere and some of the financial regulation sphere where suddenly people went, okay, there could be entire industries getting wiped out by this. Like paralegals may become totally unnecessary. I've seen in my office already that, a good large language model can accomplish what 3 or 4 paralegals used to do. And it can do it in like 15 minutes, whereas it used to take a team of paralegals 4 or 5 days to go through deposition transcripts and find all the examples. Like there are certain things AI is not good at yet. There are certain things it's phenomenal at. And compiling large data sets, it's phenomenal at. So when we see an increase in job loss, like we will with everything that's happening with AI, that puts tremendous strain on marriages and very often leads to divorce and increases the divorce rate. One of the reasons why I'm always saying to people, if you really are against divorce and you want marriages to stay together, you'd actually fight for better financial conditions for people. You wouldn't have as much income inequality in the United States. If you were fighting for there to be, people's ability to have a living wage, that would actually help drop the divorce rate significantly because of the negative impact that financial strain has on marriages. Now, go the other way with it. When people have lots and lots of economic abundance, suddenly you have the ability that you could cut things in half and you'd still have enough. So the scarcity is no longer there and people have certain incentives to be able to be like, know what, I could move out and I'd still be okay. Also, people have money to spare. And just like idle hands are the devil's plaything, disposable income is also the devil's plaything. So people have enough money to have an affair. People have enough money to go out and do irresponsible things, travel more, take more vacations, engage in behaviors that ultimately can lead to, you know, infidelity and some of the other problems that people find in relationships. Again, you know, it can go in a contradictory way, though. An increase in financial abundance can also dull down some of the tensions that were in a marriage that were creating problems, because now there's not the scarcity happening. So you can't really say like, oh, bad economic times, good economic times are good for marriage or bad for marriage. It's not really how it works. It's good and bad for marriage in both permutations for different reasons. That's why I've always said I'm in a recession-proof industry to some degree. Just like brokers, you make money on the up end, you make money on the bottom. So you make money on either one of those things. But I do think if we had more of a cultural awareness about what's going on and how economic changes can correlate with changes in our relationships, I think we'd all be in a better place.
Do you think it's literally financial issues like you just described there? Or is it if someone succeeds at their job and comes into a great amount of money, it also correlates with a personality change because they've achieved it. They're famous. They're whatever.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think money's ever been about money. Like money's never been about actual money. Like money's about status. Money's about access. Money's about power. You know, there's an old saying that's been misattributed to I believe it was misattributed to Walt Whitman. It's certainly not something he would have said. And that is that everything in the world is about sex except for sex, which is about power. So I think money is not about money. Money is sometimes about sex. Money is sometimes about, but all of these things are ultimately about power to some degree. You know, I think Schopenhauer said that the urge to save the world is almost always a false face for the urge to rule. So like whenever you see someone who's very much like cause oriented, very often it has to do with power. Like almost everything is about power. Again, maybe that's a cynical view of things. I don't know. I mean, by the way, I don't know that dominance hierarchy needs to be a dirty word. Like I think that we all have skills and proclivities, and society is about finding a balance in those things. Even communists would say, hey, each according to his means and each according to his need. So I don't think there's anything particularly right wing about saying, yeah, you know, our society is a balance between people's strengths and capabilities and people's compassion and benevolence. And that's kind of what it is, right? So I think ultimately, you know, marriage is an economy. Marriage is something built on human frailty and our desire to connect to someone else and to feel stronger when we're with someone else. So when there are cracks in financial systems, when there are cracks in the way we relate to ourselves, yeah, that's going to create cracks in the relationship.
So obviously things like money and power, tale as old as time. But in this modern era where women are now in the workforce and making their own careers, has that shifted divorce at all?
Well, I mean, it's definitely changed the way that divorce works, because for many years there was what we called the maternal presumption or the tender years doctrine, which was that women were presumed to be the appropriate custodial parent to children and men were automatically presumed to be the breadwinner in a relationship, because that was true in the overwhelming majority of relationships. That has not been true for several decades now. So now, somehow, it's not surprising that in a capitalist society, we've convinced women and men that the greatest expression of self is to become a cog in the machinery of capitalism and to make as much money as you possibly can, and to, you know, basically buy shit you don't need with money you don't have to impress people you don't like. That's basically what the highest and noblest goal of life is to just go out there and buy as much shit as you can, again, with money you may not even have, just using credit. And you should use it to impress a bunch of people that you don't actually like, and it doesn't really matter what they think of you to begin with.
America.
And somehow we've all bought that and are kind of like, yay, that's what, sign me up. So I think that's, and then when we go, why are we not particularly happy? Why are we more anxious and exhausted than we've ever been? Why do we all feel tremendous economic insecurity when we're in a time of abundance? Why are we in the most technologically sophisticated version of our society that has ever existed, and yet we feel more exhausted than ever as a society? You know, why do we have so many unbelievable time-saving devices and we all feel like we have no fucking time? And it's largely because we've just swallowed this, this model of how to live in the world. I was reading a statistic the other day that the average human being now in Western culture sees between 4,000 and 11,000 discrete advertisements in one day.
Woof.
Now, that includes things like labels on clothes, billboards that you drive past or that are on the cab next to you. But I mean, just think about the impact that is having on all of us. Advertising, by the way, is a $1 trillion industry that everyone thinks they're impervious to. Mm-hmm. And if that was true, there's no way it would be a $1 trillion industry. Like, we are all susceptible to advertising. If nothing else, just in the feeling of restlessness and dissatisfaction it creates in all of us. Mm-hmm. Because we are now the most restless and dissatisfied version of our society that we've probably ever had, which is hilarious when you consider the level of abundance that's out there. So it really is kind of a shocking reality. But again, for marriage to have challenges in that ecosystem is not in any way surprising to me.
Well, I just remember speaking to my mother about this, and I couldn't decide whether this was like the most bleak or kind of most romantic thing. But, they're married like 40, 50 years now. And I think my mom says, we're married for 40 years and like 2 of them were happy. Yeah. But she says, we needed each other. Yeah. And then there was a period of time when they got a little older, my mom's career took off a little bit. Yeah. And she said that's when she first started to have some thoughts of like, I don't fucking need to put up with this guy anymore. Yeah. And so I thought, that's bleak that we're only succeeding when we're grinding, and that if we had abundance, we wouldn't need each other. But maybe that's kind of the magic of it is when you need each other. Yeah,
it could be the need for each other. It could also be how we define success. I think that we've created a model of society right now where no matter what you're doing, there's something else you should be doing or could be doing better. To paraphrase Biggie Smalls, he said his life was about money and pussy, and that whichever one he was chasing, the other one was getting away. Mm-hmm. And so I think he had a point. And the point is that whatever you're pursuing, there's another thing you could be pursuing. And unless you're prepared to exhaust yourself by making sure that your physical body, your financial wealth, your emotional connection, your familial abundance, all of those are at peak levels, which God forbid, like how would you do that? Are there really enough hours in the day? How regimented would you need to be to accomplish that? In all likelihood, you're better in some spheres than the other, and so the question then becomes are you focusing on where you're succeeding, or are you focusing on where, well, I'm succeeding here, but I'm not doing as well here as a result because I don't have as much energy and time to give to that other thing. So I think sometimes when people focus themselves on, okay, this is the project that I'm giving the most attention to, whether it's kids, your marriage, your professional successful life, those kinds of things, I think it's obviously easier to hit one target than to hit 15 different targets. So when you talk to people of prior generations, their attitude is, look, the goal was to like have the kids, raise the kids, get them successful and out the door. So our happiness was no longer as important once our kids were born. I don't know that that's the best way to live your life, but I also don't know that it's the worst way to live your life. Like, I'm not qualified to say. It's not a life I would choose. It's not for me having children and focusing on your children getting out the door and being successful and saying, well, my own happiness isn't in any way important in that equation. And if I'm miserable, as long as the machine is moving forward, then we're doing well. I don't know that that's the best way for me to live my life, but there are some people that would probably say, oh no, that was a perfectly acceptable way to live my life. And I think that was a sacrifice that, was worthwhile to me. I've always said that the measure of how much you believe in something is not what you're willing to do for it, but what you're willing to give up for it. Yeah. And what you're willing to sacrifice for it. And that's when you really see, true love is when someone's not sacrificing to give. Like, they're just willing to say, yeah, you can have whatever. Like, there's no question that what's more important to me, and most of us see this in our children, that you feel about your children, the feeling of like, oh, them being happy makes me happier than me being happy. Mm-hmm. Them having something sweet in their mouth is greater to me than the taste of something sweet for me. And the joy of their joy gives me greater pleasure than any pleasure that could be given to me by me. So I think that for most people, that's an insight into the nature of truly selfless love. And that's a beautiful thing. And perhaps if we aspire to in marriage, having that be the theme, and you're lucky enough to marry someone who they have that same theme. So I'm going to look out for you and make your happiness my top priority. You're going to look out for me and make my happiness your top priority. And that in an ecosystem is what we call symbiosis. The problem is if one of those people isn't committed to that, that is a unbelievably unhealthy relationship. So you're taking a tremendous amount of risk there.
So before we move on to problem number 2, the infidelity, when it comes to finances, I feel like a big argument in recent years has been shared accounts, shared money, one pool of money. I believe I saw David Ramsey the other day saying, the most important thing is having a common goal and being fully transparent. And then that's how these couples achieve these goals of homes or retirement or whatever. But then I also see the other side of it, people saying they want their independence and autonomy. What's the right answer?
I mean, it's not a question of what's the objectively right answer. It's a question of what's the right answer for you as an individual, and then you as an individual as part of a couple. I think that there are couples where they do better with tremendous, intertwined finances and total transparency. If you know you're the kind of person who really can't be trusted with finances, like I've always been a very financially reliable and stable person. I'm 53 years old. I've never paid a penny of interest on a credit card in my life. And I grew up without money, and I didn't have money until I was probably in my 30s or maybe even early 40s. But I just never bought things I couldn't afford. And I've had to struggle sometimes as a result of that. But it was to me worth it to not have the stress that came with being in debt. And I'm very grateful for that. And I'm grateful that I helped, raise 2 boys who have that same model and economic perspective. My ex-wife, although we didn't have some things in common, that was something we had in common. We were both very financially responsible people. So I think some people would do better having, finances that there's some oversight to them, right? Like I can acknowledge about myself, if I have potato chips in the house, I'm eating them. So if I want to maintain a high level of fitness and I want my suits to fit nicely and I want to feel good, I should not have potato chips in the house, because if they're there, I'm going to eat them. I can control my food environment better than my brain. So I know that about myself. If you're the kind of person that goes, if I go on one of the sports betting websites, I'm going to make bets. If I go in the casino, I'm going to bet in ways that are irresponsible and bet more than I should. I can go to a casino, play blackjack, say, here's the amount of money I'm willing to lose, and I will not put a penny more than that on the table, and I'm fine. But if you're not that kind of person, know yourself, and that's great. And know who your partner is and be able to sort of help each other in that way. I think that there's no one size fits all approach to any of this. There are couples that I think would find it unromantic to have totally enmeshed finances because it removes any sense of mystery. If somebody buys you a Christmas gift, you know exactly what they paid for it. If someone wants to buy something for themselves without the other person being involved in that transaction, they can't do it.
I think that's crazy. I think I think everyone should be able to splurge when they want. Or, everyone has some proclivities or some whatever kinks or whatever you want to do some things privately.
Look, I'm a fan of privacy still existing in relationships. I am not a leave the bathroom door open kind of a person. I think that my mother raised me that you don't go in a woman's bag. Don't go in a woman's purse. And I remember if I wanted a mint or something when I was a kid and I would go in my mom's bag to get it, I would get in a lot of trouble. And my mother used to say, you don't ever go in a woman's bag. And I remember when I grew up thinking I would be dating someone and they would say oh, can you get this out of my bag? And I would get their bag for them and bring it over to them. And here you go. And you can take it out of your own bag, because there was a sense of, not only do you want some privacy, but I kind of like that you have some privacy. I think there should be some drawers that are just yours and that I don't know what's in there. I don't always want to know how the magic is made of a woman's makeup and things like that. You go ahead and do all that. And I don't really want to know how that's made. You go ahead and I want to see the finished product, and that's lovely. Have some privacy, have some autonomy. Again, I'm not suggesting that if we're dating and you have the flu that I won't be there to help, and I don't mind, that's okay. Caregiving is part of the thing. But I think if we show up our best version of self sometimes, that's really To me, that's a very charming thing in relationship to sustain long-term relationship. Some people feel the other way. Some people are like, nope, I want there to be no boundaries between the two of us. We're going to go to the bathroom in front of each other. This is how we're going to be. Okay. I mean, if that works for the two of you, it doesn't scare the horses, knock yourselves out. But I personally don't find that model long-term something compelling. I think that actually leads to a sort of familiarity and contempt that I don't think is healthy for a couple. But there's all kinds of permutations. If you have total financial transparency, you are giving up a tremendous amount of your privacy and autonomy. And I don't always think that that's a good idea.
Which can often then lead to problem number 2. A lot of these issues you're talking about, I think the end result can be infidelity. Are those two often linked together?
I would say that financial impropriety and infidelity are two sides of the same coin that come from the same base thing, which is disconnection, period. Like when people say to me, oh, what's the number one cause of divorce? I would say disconnection. And that's an obvious answer, but it's not the answer people want. People want, oh, cheating. But cheating's not the problem. It's why you're cheating. It's like what led to the cheating. Happy people don't cheat. Like people who are in sad, because you didn't have to be together. Like at some point you said, I've met a woman who makes me want to give up all the other ones. I've met a man who makes me want to give up all the other ones. Unless you have a consensually non-monogamous relationship, you're basically making a decision that, okay, this is the person I want to be with. And by the way, I think that should be the aspiration. The aspiration should be, I have sex with as many people as I want to in my relationship. And that happens to be one. Like that's the goal. It shouldn't be, yeah, I mean, I'd love to have sex with a whole bunch of different people, but I kind of made a promise that I'm just going to be with this one person. Like if that's the model of your relationship, how great is that? Like, I don't know that that's so great. Like I personally think your moral framework should not be based on like consequences from the other person, like punishment. Like I murder as many people as I want to, which is none.
0.
Because I don't want to murder. And it's not because A, I believe there's going to be a divine punishment, or B, I'm afraid I'll get in trouble legally. Like if they start the purge, I'm not going to go out and murder people because I murder as many people as I want to, which is none. Because I believe that sentient beings, humans have, a certain like right to autonomy and agency and to live their lives in peace. So I don't want anyone murdering me. So I'm not going to murder anyone. I don't want to live in a society where murder is an acceptable thing to do. That's like how it should be. Monogamy is the same thing. Like if you're in a relationship and you're like, man, I wish I could fuck a whole bunch of other people, but I made a promise that I'm not going to. I don't really know that that's the ideal conditions. And how long are you going to be able to white knuckle it like that if your willpower is the thing that's holding you back from that? Ideally, what it should be is, hey, when I'm full, I don't want to eat anymore. When I'm satisfied in my relationship, I don't want to sleep with other people. So find someone who satisfies you. And then when that relationship starts to be less satisfying, have the courage and the faith in your relationship and in yourself, and give yourself enough grace to say, hey, you know what? My dissatisfaction is something I have a right to express, and share with your partner, hey, I'm feeling restless. I'm feeling restless. And I hadn't for so long. I haven't even looked at other women, but I'm starting to get like a wandering eye, and I don't know what's going on. If it's something in me, if it's something in us has shifted, but I want to be good at this. So let's figure out how to do it together. And by the way, if you're someone's partner and they have the courage to share that with you, like why not have the ability to then go like, okay, I'm going to hear that as this person saying, hey, help. Like help this relationship. Like we signed up for this job. We want to be good at it. We want to succeed at it. How can we be good at it together? Don't hear it in a defensive way. Hear it in a way that's okay, good. I appreciate you being that open and honest with me. One of the things I've learned is in so many years of being a divorce lawyer is telling people things they don't want to hear. It's really hard sometimes, but it's like the most loving thing you can do is to tell people things they need to hear even when they don't want to hear it, because it's so important. It's so important to be able to share uncomfortable truth with people rather than very comfortable lies. So, I think all of these things, financial impropriety, infidelity, they're a function of disconnection. But of course, is there a restlessness in humans? Do we crave novelty from a sexual standpoint? Are we now presented with more options than we've ever had before, more ways to connect with people we have abso-fucking-lutely no business connecting with? Yeah, I mean, that's an unprecedented amount of options presented to us. And if you hang around a barbershop long enough, you're going to get a fucking haircut. So that's what's happening. We're just surrounded by opportunities. And if we're surrounded by opportunities to engage in sexual conduct, whether it's flirting or whether it's actual infidelity, we have so many opportunities to do it now. Will you at some point? Is it like your food environment? Is it like having potato chips in the house? I think having Instagram is the sexual equivalent of having potato chips in the house 24/7. It's just not a great idea, and it's potentially very dangerous.
I think that's pretty profound, to go back to what you said about, I guess maybe this says a lot about me, but the desire for monogamy. Like I did always think of it more as a rule construct that you have to adhere to in exchange for the companionship.
Because we were both raised Catholic.
Yeah.
That's why. That's the model.
I mean, and to keep it with the food analogy, like I think of it maybe more as like dessert, where it's like, I do want dessert, but I know that ultimately that's not good for me.
Yeah,
I would like to sleep. Like I'd like to sleep around, but I think that would be bad because it blows up something I love.
Of course. So I'm not suggesting that, like, you know, in the ideal relationship, you will never be tempted. Of course, like just because you're on a diet doesn't mean you don't want to look at the menu. Sometimes it doesn't mean you're not going to feel temptation. The question is what is discipline? Discipline is trading what you want now for what you want most.
Right.
So of course, would chocolate cake taste delicious? Of course, fucking chocolate cake, it's delicious. What's not to like about it, right? But what do you want more? You want vibrant, good health. You want sustained energy. You want your clothes to fit. You want to feel good about yourself and have the confidence that comes with feeling physically fit. You all of those things, right? So what do you do? Do you go, okay, I'm not going to see chocolate cake as fit? No, but what you do is you try to be mature enough to remember, how do you feel when you eat too much chocolate cake? And it's the same thing with this. Like, you know, I'm not suggesting like, oh, I never want to sleep with another woman again. But what you're saying is, oh yeah, that would be really fun. But what's more fun is having this deep connection with this person and having this sustained level of affection and trust with this person and having a relationship physically that builds over the years where you get to know every intimacy of each other in a good way and you know exactly how to push each other's buttons in the best ways possible. Like that's an incredibly worthy goal, just like being very, very fit is a very worthy goal. Can you have a happy life and not be physically fit? Probably, yeah. Can you have a very happy life and not be a monogamous individual who instead enjoys sort of the sense pleasure of romantic and sexual connection from all kinds of different sources? I'm sure you can. I'm sure there are people that, but is it a different kind of pleasure? I think it probably is. You know, and what I will say is, if you've ever been very, very fit, when you get out of shape, you will never be that happy again, because you will always remember how good you felt, how clear-headed, how physically good you felt when you were in excellent shape. And that, I think, is when you've been in a deeply connected romantic relationship that has deeply satisfying sexual connection, you're going to go, wow, that was so good. That was so much better than lots of transient sexual connections. Anyone out there who's ever played the field for an extended period of time and kind of went through a male or female version of a hoe phase will say to you that after a while, they kind of were like, yeah, it's like eating chocolate cake every single day. For the first couple of days, it's really good. And then after that, you're like, oh my God, like this is just too much. Like this is not really making me feel good long-term. Because also one of the lessons I taught my sons once they reached like early teens, I wasn't going to say to them, don't have sex, because that's what I was told. That's what everyone was told. It didn't work. You know, but what I taught them is, there's no such thing as sex without consequences. All sex has consequences. Sometimes those consequences are very serious, like pregnancy or STIs. But sometimes those consequences are just, it changes the dynamic of the relationship. It changes the nature of your connection with this other person. It changes the perception of what you owe to each other and what you need from each other and it changes the power balance between two people. But all sex has consequences. And so anytime you go out in the world and think, oh, there's going to be no consequences to this sexual connection, you're lying to yourself. There will be consequences. Again, can you mitigate consequences? Sure. Good communication up front can mitigate consequences. Transactional sexual relationships like sex workers and things that can have certain, like, okay, I'm going to give you this and you're going to give me this. Like that's a very transactional sexual relationship. But the question is that really going to lead you to the most fulfilling connection with another person? That's a very personal question that only you can answer. I think most people will say, I am someone who will say, I don't think that having lots of random sexual partners is a path to happiness. And I don't think for most people, like forced monogamy is necessarily a path to happiness. I think that finding a person with which you have a deep emotional and sexual connection is much more likely to succeed than white-knuckling your way through monogamy.
All right, hit them with the Sexton-ism. I know the people have been missing them.
I know.
We got a
People
good
love the
one for today.
Sexton-isms. We get a lot of feedback. All right, here's the Sexton-ism. I dropped the other day, and you were like, oh, you got to put that one. So there's nothing wrong with underachieving. It just doesn't pay well. I used to say that all the time, especially to my sons. Underachieving, a lot of people prefer to be an underachiever. They don't want to push themselves. They don't want to drive themselves. And there is nothing wrong with underachieving. It just doesn't pay well. So ultimately, if you want to be successful, there's nothing great that's ever achieved without much enduring, whether that's a lot of enduring on the front end so then you can coast. If you want to be an underachiever after you've achieved a bunch of shit, and then you can kind of kick back and coast. But in fact, underachieving very rarely pays well. Usually nothing great is ever achieved without much enduring. So I always encourage people, lean into your competencies, lean into the thing that might be challenging and difficult to do, but that ultimately could lead you to that path of reward. Hey gang, that's going to do it for this episode of Better Call Sexton. Hey, before we leave, remember, like, subscribe, hit that notification bell. It really does help the channel. We're trying out something new. Go on to SextonShow.com or go to @NYCDivorceLawyer on Instagram. Check out the link that's in my bio there. It's going to bring you right to a link where you can submit video questions to me. So you can submit questions, and in later episodes, we're going to show those videos, and I'm going to answer those questions. It's going to be a lot of fun. We were inundated with suggestions, but the video feature isn't working yet. We've got it going now, but we've had a lot of really interesting suggestions from people. So get on there, check it out, give us your questions, and we'll look forward to answering them. But for now, we're adjourned.